Hello and welcome back to my vlog. Essays on the Constitution of the United States, Part 43. Reply to a Landholder 2, Part 2, and the conclusion. The landholder, addressing Mr. Martin, further says, "Your reply to my second charge against Mr. Gary may be soon dismissed. Compare his letter to the legislature of his state with your defense, and you will find that you have put into his mouth objections different from anything it contains, so that if your representation be true, his must be false." The objections referred to are those mentioned by Mr. Martin as being made by Mr. Gary against the supreme power of Congress over the militia. Mr. Gary, in his letter to the legislature, states as an objection that some of the powers of the federal legislature are ambiguous, and others, meaning the unlimited power of Congress to keep up a standing army in time of peace and their entire control of the militia, are indefinite and dangerous. Against both these did Mr. Gary warmly contend, and why his representations must be false. If Mr. Martin's are true, which particularized what Mr. Gary's stated generally, can only be discovered by such a profound reasoner as the Connecticut landholder. And if you found your way through that sentence, more power to you. Let me reread it. Against both these did Mr. Gary warmly contend, and why his representations must be false if Mr. Martin's are true, which particularized what Mr. Gary's stated generally, can only be discovered by such a profound reasoner as the Connecticut landholder. The vanity of this writer in supposing that his charges would be the subject of constitutional investigation can only be equaled by his impertinence in interfering with the politics of other states, or by his ignorance in supposing a state convention could take cognizance of such matters as he calls charges, and that Mr. Gary required a formal defense or the assistance of his colleagues to defeat the unprovoked and libelous attacks of the landholder or any other unprincipled reviler. The landholder says that Mr. Martin thought the Deputy Attorney General of the United States for the state of Maryland destined for a different character, and then inspired him with the hope that he might derive from a desperate opposition what he saw no prospect of gaining by a contrary conduct. But the landholder ventures to predict that though Mr. Martin was to double his efforts, he would fail in his object. By this way we may form some estimate of the patriotism of the landholder, for whilst he so readily resolves Mr. Martin's conduct into a maneuver for office, he gives too much reason to suppose that he himself has no idea of any other motive in conducting politics. But how can the landholder ascertain that Mr. Martin thought the office mentioned destined for a different character? Was the landholder present at the destination? If so, it was natural for him, knowing there was a combination against Mr. Martin, however remote this gentleman was from discovering it, to suppose his accidental opposition to the complotters proceeded from a discovery of the plot. Surely the landholder must have some reason for his conjecture respecting the motives of Mr. Martin's conduct, or to be subject to the charge of publishing calumny, knowing it to be such. If then this great statesman was in a secret which has been long impenetrable, he is now entitled to the honor of giving the public the most important information they have received concerning the origin of the new Constitution. And having candidly informed them who is not, he ought to inform who is to fill that office, and all others of the new federal government. It may then in some measure be ascertained what individuals have supported the Constitution on principles of patriotism, and who under this guise have been only squabbling for office. Perhaps we shall find that the landholder is to have the contract for supplying the standing army under the new government, and that many others who have recurred to abuse on this occasion have some such happy prospects. Indeed, the landholder puts it beyond a doubt, if we can believe him, that it was determined in the Privy Council of this Federal Convention that however Mr. Martin might advocate the new Constitution, he should not have the office mentioned. For if this was not the case, how can the landholder so roundly assert that Mr. Martin could have no prospect, by a contrary conduct, of gaining the office? And so remarkably sanguine is the landholder that the members of the Privy Council would be senators of the new Congress, in which case the elections would undoubtedly be made according to the conventional list of nominations, as that he ventures to predict. Though Mr. Martin was to double his efforts, he would fail in his object. Thus, whilst this blazing star of federalism is taking great pains to hold up Mr. Gary and Mr. Mason as having held private meetings to aggrandize old Massachusetts and the ancient Dominion, he has confessed enough to show that his private meetings were solely to aggrandize himself. Politics as usual. Make it a great day, and bye for now.